Peter Hitchens joins me in this hour after an exhausting weekend of finding that there are more and more things wrong with this country than there should be. We've been talking in the first hour, of course, about the drug business and how awful it is that we can now say, with something other than pride, that we have had our own drive-by shooting on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of central London, very close to Euston Station, where a 7-year-old girl is amongst those fighting for her life as a result. And there seems to be some kind of connection to the Colombian drug cartels, which is slightly confusing because I didn't know the Colombian drug cartels were operating in Britain, but apparently they are. We thought all the drug business in Britain was run by Albanians, but apparently we weren't entirely correct about that. We'll talk about that, but we'll also talk about the two ends of the drug business, not simply the people that ship it in by the hundreds of millions of pounds, but also the people that sell it on an individual basis to a lot of individuals, and one individual in particular that Peter wrote about. And we did say we were going to try to get through the show without mentioning this particular individual who lives in California with his wife and his 2 children, but I'm afraid it's going to be a bit impossible. Peter, very good.
Let's not name him.
Let's not name him.
Let's not name, but he, as you say, he is a California resident.
Yes.
Author of a major bestseller. And,
yeah, a new book.
Yeah, and very busy on television.
Yes.
And one of the things which he has revealed in this book is that he is beyond doubt, by his own confession in publications under his own name, which he's volunteered for, he is beyond doubt a past user of illegal drugs.
Yes.
Particularly marijuana.
And Class A drugs as well.
Well, you come up against here a really bad thing. This classification of drugs as A, B and C has actually always been designed to make marijuana look less bad than it is. The idea that somehow it's safer, softer, less of a problem than the bogeyman drugs of LSD, cocaine, heroin is a fantasy, and absolutely increasingly not true. And over again, whenever I write about this, this happens, and it happened even far more so to my friend Patrick Coburn when he wrote about what happened to his son Henry in the book Henry's Demons. People tell you of horrible experiences of friends of theirs or even their own family have had over young men. It's usually young men who become seriously mentally ill after thinking that marijuana was a safe, soft drug and finding out that it is the reverse of that. It doesn't kill, or at least not very often, but what it does do, or what it is very strongly correlated with, is mental illness of a particularly severe and incurable kind. And here we have somebody who could quite easily still, I suppose, in theory, become head of state of this country, and certainly was in line for that, saying that during his time at school and in much of the rest of his life, he's been using this drug. And I don't know any more detail than he's provided about this, but I would say, first of all, what did his police protection squad know about it? And if they knew about it, what did they do about it? Have we been told? And isn't it an issue? If
were they complicit?
If a member of the family which provides the head of state, which is given special protection from danger and crime, does not himself abide by the law of the land, what is the implication of that? If any other law apart from the law against marijuana had been broken, wouldn't there be an outcry? I'm just astonished by how little attention has been given to this confession. Yeah, and it's as recent, I think, as 2.5 years ago in the book. The most recent confession of use of marijuana is that I don't know whether it's happened since, but it's plainly not something that he just did for a short while as a schoolboy.
The matter arising is whether or not it's still an ongoing situation, whether there's still, because he lives in California where smoking dope is legalised.
Well, it's legal in the state terms, but it's not legal under federal law.
No, it's not. But what I mean is...
Well, that's a technical point which, of course, might affect his future immigration applications.
It might do.
We don't know.
But it probably won't. But what it might do is inhibit her ambitions for the White House, which we're told that there are. But the interesting thing for me is that when the Sun wrote the front page headline that he had smoked weed and done cocaine, the general response that I got from people was, well, so what? Doesn't everybody?
Well, there's the thing.
And that wasn't news.
But
apparently.
He isn't everybody. Actually, everybody doesn't. I think you'll find a large number of families manage to dissuade their young from doing it, and a large number of very sensible young people learn about what the problems are, and they stay well clear of it. I think, and quite a lot of people, I think, try it once or maybe twice and never again. The number of regular habitual users of marijuana in this country is still, I think, mercifully reasonably low. Because if it were higher, I think we'd have many more instances so many instances of mental illness correlated with it, that we would have such a serious problem over providing provision for such people that it would be a national crisis. So fortunately it isn't as big as people say. But the other thing is here, you were talking about the existence of perhaps of Colombian drug cartels in this country. The whole origin, there's a constant search for Mr. Big in the great drug scandal of our times. Let's catch Mr. Big, let's put some guy in jail in Mexico or like Colombia, and then you put them in jail, and isn't it odd? Nothing happens. Yeah. The reason why nothing happens is that it's not Mr. Big you need to worry about. It's 10 million Mr. Small, who in this country and in many European countries and in the United States give their money to drug dealers who then pass it on up the chain to the cartels. The whole drug scandal, all the misery, the armed men, the crime, everything else that goes with it is financed by smug, self-satisfied people in this country who openly and happily break the law against drugs, and they think they're good. Actually, they're paying for evil. And it's extraordinary. And this endless search for Mr. Big, when Mr. Small lives on your street.
Well, it's one of
the police won't touch him, even if he's not a prince of the royal house. The police won't touch people.
But isn't it also interesting that the one thing that was tried was to try and take on the kind of the woke youngsters of this country, the people who detest drinking coffee unless it's fair trade coffee, you know, who will not buy an avocado because it might have been flown here rather than something that was grown here. But when you appeal to their better nature and say, please don't buy cocaine because it's actually produced by slave-driven individuals in very poor countries where the farmers are forced into making cocaine out of coca leaves under pain of death. They don't care.
No, and also they don't care. What do they think the conditions are? And the hundreds of marijuana farms in this country. Who do they think is working on them, and under what conditions? But it's the one. They hate the big fast food chains. They hate the soft drink companies. They quite rightly hate the tobacco companies. But when it comes to this. This extremely powerful greed lobby, and it is very powerful, and it lobbies constantly to be allowed to do this legally. The people who claim to be righteous and good and eat nothing but vegan and check that their air is pure before they breathe it, they don't care. And it's complete hypocrisy and a complete anomaly, and it's not challenged. And I'm just astonished. Again, here I am. Why aren't there other people, loud voices in politics, the media, the churches, the academy? Why aren't people all over the place saying, this is a danger, we need to fight against it? Why is there no more resistance to it? It's huge, and it's successful, and they're inches away from getting a majority in Parliament for legalization. And you know what legalization means? Legalization means open sale in Tesco's and chemist shops and on the internet, open sale completely without any. And it also means advertising. And man, we spent 50 years in this country trying to stop the advertising of tobacco. It took an amazingly long time, presumably because the government didn't want to lose the tax revenue, whatever it was. But we've now done that, and now we're very close to a position in which marijuana will be legal and advertised in this country. When it is, let's put it like this: there is a very strong suspicion that it is a major menace to health.
Well, let me come back to that in a moment.
No consistency here at all.
Just got a bit of breaking news. Serving Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick has pleaded guilty to 49 offences, including 24 counts of rape. We'll bring you more on that story as it develops, but that's a Metropolitan Police officer, a serving police officer, pleaded guilty to 49 different offences. Dreadful business. Because I was in California, where my son lives, about 2 years ago now, I suppose, and I was quite taken aback at not only how much marijuana was clearly visible everywhere you went, in terms of you could smell it literally everywhere in LA. We were in Hollywood, we went up to Mann's Chinese Theatre, did the whole thing, went to Malibu, went to, all sorts of different parts of that part of California. But the thing that surprised me the most was the advertising. You know, billboards, huge billboards, advertising not only and quite sort of sophisticated advertising. You know, beautiful young women smoking dope with a message, kind of funniness. There was a humour. There was also, as we went into Palm Desert at one point, and there were huge billboards offering land for sale for the purposes of cultivating marijuana. And the biggest thing that shocked me was they had a sort of marijuana superstore, which was a building just off the San Diego freeway, which was about 5 stories high and was there purely and simply to sell marijuana.
All organic, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
No chemistry.
No, I don't. Has it come? It was part of, I think, Proposition 64. I think it was, which was the ballot which brought about legalization in California. That advertising would be involved. It's an immensely long proposition, but it was, if you read it carefully, you could see advertising. But I wonder if TV advertising is included in that. But the other fascinating thing about this is the claim was always made by the legalizers, oh, well, if you make it legal, then we can control it. We'll keep down the level. But of course, they will also tax it. And I think also, if you had wanted to buy illegal marijuana in California, you'd have had no trouble at all, because the illegal gang-controlled markets continue to flourish because they sell at much lower prices because there's no tax, and also because they give people more of what they want, which is high strength. So in fact, this idea that legalizing would make it safer was a complete fantasy, and has been demonstrated also in Canada, I have to say, to be a fantasy. And yet these people still keep saying it, even though it's demonstrably not true.
I mean, I suppose the argument in favour of legalisation is that you've already got a problem. If you can tax it and you can use that money for something good, like the school system, or in our case the NHS, is it not worth the price that you pay? Because you've already got the problem. Why not at least get some money in return for it, if you like?
But in this country, we cannot raise enough tax to pay for all the things that the government wants to do. That's why we borrow so heavily, and huge amounts of your tax and mine actually go on. This is the most infuriating thing about your tax bill. They go on paying the interest on the money we've borrowed because we can't raise enough tax. The idea that if you tax marijuana, that we're suddenly going to have a huge pot of money for the NHS or whatever is piffle.
Well, we would have some, though, wouldn't we?
No, it wouldn't make any difference. The governments overspend, and they'll continue to overspend. It's a fantasy. The other thing is, legality is irreversible. Once you've said this is legal, you can't turn around 10 years after and say, oh, terribly sorry, we made a mistake. It's too late. Iran is the classic example of this. Iran is a country where alcohol used to be legal. They have tried with all the resources, secret police, terror, gallows, the rest of it, to try and stamp out alcohol in Tehran ever since the Ayatollahs took over. Total failure. If you want to buy alcohol in Iran, which I didn't when I was there, but my late brother, who also went there, did, you could have a bootleg around your place in about 5 minutes, and it's completely failed, and this is a terror state. They can't stop it. So if we decided, say 10, 15 years since, oh, we've made a terrible mistake, the mental hospitals are overflowing, the streets are full of people who are obviously mentally ill, you can't rely anymore on anybody from school bus drivers to surgeons to be undoped, it's a disaster, which all these things will happen if we legalise it. You won't be able to ban it. Because even if you do, it won't be enforceable. It's an irreversible decision. And of all the moments for a country to be considering legalising a drug, surely the moment when the evidence that it's strongly correlated with severe mental illness would be the moment at least pause.
Right. Well, we're going to take a little pause here, and I'm going to leave you with a question to ponder, because those people who now say maybe we should legalise or consider legalising marijuana are the same people that say if alcohol was invented now, it probably wouldn't be licensed and sold legally, which is another question.
But they're right, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, but I mean, let's come back to that. Peter Hitchens is here. We'll be talking about that, plus the disappearing act of one Boris Johnson, as you talkTV. Welcome back to the Independent Republican Mike Graham, right here on talkTV. Peter Hitchens is here, and we've been talking about the marijuana situation. So, I mean, there are those who would say, well, of course, you know, because your parents' generation and you're a parent and you've been drinking all your life, that's probably damaged you. Alcohol's just as bad. Is it?
Yes, it is. It's terrible, but it's irreversible. It's happened now. We have in this country two legal poisons, alcohol and tobacco, which if they were introduced now, and we knew what we know about them at the time, they would not be legalised. but they are legalised. It's irreversible. This could never be an argument for legalising a third dangerous poison. It just doesn't make sense. A lot of people try and use it as one, but it isn't one. I personally think there was a great tragedy in this country in the 1980s when the Thatcher government began to destroy the very sensible licensing laws, which you doubtless remember, which made it difficult enough for people to get a drink that it actually did deter quite a lot of people from levels of drunkenness that are now common.
Yes, you certainly couldn't drink.
That was practical, and it was a stupid thing to dismantle those. And I remember I was at that time. I was. I think a defence correspondent. I had no column, I had no platform, I had no broadcasting access. I sat there fuming in my seat, reading this stuff. Alleged reports from Scotland saying, "Oh, we've introduced pilot projects. It hasn't made anything worse." That's complete rubbish. Yeah. And of course, it did make things worse, and we saw how much worse it made things. And there was no argument against it. And I think that was a great tragedy. It was.
Although I also do remember the days, particularly of when I was driving around, looking to buy a house or something, and you'd get to some country pub and they'd go, "Oh no, sorry, it's 2 o'clock," and you'd be like, "Right, so I can't have lunch or a drink. No, sorry. When can we do that then? Oh, 5:30.
Yeah, but
it was a bit ridiculous.
But nobody who really, really wanted a drink in those days was prevented from getting one. The absolute end of, apart from all those clubs,
right,
which people belonged to, and the pubs which opened to a special knock on the window. There was also the ultimate resort in those days, which has now been abolished, of course. You could get on a train and go to the buffet.
Do you remember the Chinese restaurant in Shaftesbury Avenue where they would serve you, after I think about 1 a.m, they would serve you wine in a teapot?
Well, that's interesting. I once had vodka in a teapot in the Urals in the Soviet Union for similar reasons.
Yes.
It tasted very strange, I have to say.
Yeah, it doesn't seem right. It's a bit like when I was in India once and they poured the tea out of the pot and it had milk in it already in the pot. And it's the strangest looking thing I've ever seen. I was like, that's weird looking.
Well, you wait and see how weird vodka looks.
Yeah,
out of the teapot.
Weird. Anyway, let's talk about the Boris Johnson disappearing act that we witnessed earlier on this week. This was a Grant Shapps escapade, wasn't it? And another great sort of British triumph.
We have to say that Mr. Shapps says it's nothing to do with him.
Well, of course.
But there was this picture of him and Al Johnson and the rocket, which recently didn't go into orbit. It was taken about a year ago, and in the middle of the picture, where else would he have been, bulging away, was our former Prime Minister, Sir Alexander Johnson.
Yeah.
But then suddenly, last week, before the rocket had its anomaly and failed, this picture was published of Mr. Shapps, beaming all over his face, standing next to the rocket, and lo! In the middle of the picture, there was no Alexander de Pfeffel Boris Johnson.
And it was a very amateurish manoeuvre, wasn't it? Because it didn't look as if they'd tried... I mean, I suppose even the most clever photoshoppers might have had trouble moving them closer together, but they could have done something other than just have a great big gap.
Well, it did, yeah, but it managed to survive on the internet for a short while. And then Mr. Shapps deleted the deletion, saying nothing to do with me. So we have to accept that. That is nothing to do. So who was it?
It is very curious.
Do you think it's possible that Al Johnson didn't want to be seen in a photograph with Grant Shapps?
I don't think it's that, because I don't think there's any picture.
One has to speculate.
No, I think there's no picture that Boris Johnson doesn't want to be in. I think he wants to be in every picture at all times.
Well, there you are. Then it is just one of those mysteries.
Because it's been one of those weeks where there's been a bit of Johnson-related activity, where clearly his friends have been planting stories that he's looking for a safe seat. So that he will stand with Rishi Sunak rather than against him.
Well, this thing works.
Look, there it is. You can now see him appearing and disappearing. It's brilliant. Yeah, there he is. Now you see him. Yeah. Now you don't.
In the doctored version, it does look as if there's some problem with personal freshness, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? But they've also presumably painted in the window properly as well. They've had to do that. Otherwise, it would have looked even more strange.
Apparently, it is initiated, and this is the other weird thing, which in my mind is something even worse. It's originally an official Downing Street picture, because now someone goes around with the Prime Minister all the time taking pictures of him.
I mean, I suppose the only way that Boris Johnson might have asked to be removed is because it did fail, due to something that I've never heard of before, not because I've never heard the word, but I've never heard it used in this way, an anomaly, which apparently makes it impossible to fire a rocket properly.
I think we're going to be hearing the expression anomaly quite a lot.
It's a new one, isn't it?
But it's very useful.
It's good. So this week we've had Boris Johnson might be standing in a safe seat. We've had Matthew Parris saying that if he stands anywhere near his seat, or the one that where he lives, he'll stand against him, as he hates him that much. We've also had the return of Partygate as a result, because the enemies of Boris Johnson have been saying, oh, but don't you know that people were having sex at that party that he wasn't at? And you just go, guys, can you just get over the obsession with Boris Johnson? No, my firm belief is that the people of this country don't want him back.
I have to say, well, maybe not, but I wouldn't bank on that. I have to say the spectacle of a by-election in which Matthew Parris and Al Johnson stand against each other has a certain attraction.
It does.
I think you're wrong. I think Johnson would win. You've got to remember the power of celebrity on which he floats.
Yeah.
People have heard of him in a way they have
I'm
not heard of
I'm not saying he wouldn't. No, I don't mean to say he wouldn't win a by-election or win an election. What I'm saying, I don't want him back as Prime Minister, is what I think.
Well, I mean, it doesn't seem in a democracy. Do you ever get what you want?
No, I've never have.
Doesn't actually seem to be the idea, does it?
Not so far.
In a democracy, you get told what to want, and then what you were told to want is what happens.
Yes. Well, sometimes.
Yeah. And it may even be that at some point you will be told to want Johnson back.
The other great story this week, which you wrote about, Sir Francis Drake, and how ludicrous that he should now be castigated and kind of vilified as a cruel and nasty creature.
I don't mind that. I mean, he did do terrible things. I mean, there's a great Irish resentment of him because of an event on Rathmines Island, I think. But undoubtedly he could be a cruel and brutal person, and there isn't any question that he was involved in the slave trade. And I would condemn all those things, but I don't think that you can at the same time dismiss him from history as somebody who wasn't a great man. I don't like Oliver Cromwell either. I think Cromwell, again, known for his massacres. I don't like his politics. I don't like what he did. But the idea that he wasn't a great man and that we shouldn't remember him,
a substantial figure,
ridiculous.
You could say, couldn't you?
Yeah, and that there were some things that Francis Drake did which were undoubtedly extremely good for this country. I think if he hadn't defeated the Armada, then the reign of the greatest monarch this country ever had, probably the greatest head of government this country ever had, Elizabeth I, would have come to an end, and we'd have been occupied by Spanish troops. Would that have been good? Would you?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Would you have said, well, we could get Francis Drake in to defeat the Armada, but he's got this terrible record in the slave trade. So let's get somebody who loses battles instead.
I know, we haven't really got time to discuss this. Maybe we'll do this for next week. I mean, I don't know whether the Spanish are having the same sort of ridiculous, paroxysms of history, because they're somehow finding themselves living in a country where lots of people went to South America and Central America, killed entire nations of people with disease, and enslaved all sorts of ancient, civilizations. Are they having the same problem?
The Victorian attitude towards the Spanish Empire in Latin America was of contempt and rage.
Yeah.
And they looked down on it very strongly. They said they believed the Spanish had behaved comparatively with us very badly.
Yeah. But are the Spanish looking into their history and doing this?
Probably not. But I say, in an age where we bow and scrape to Saudi Arabia, it seems to me we aren't in much of a position to complain about Sir Francis Drake. And bear this in mind as well: 20 years hence, there may be people who want to name schools after Anthony Charles Lyndon Blair. Would you want your child to go to one of those?
No, it's funny you should say that, because guess who we're going to speak to next? John McTiernan, former Tony Blair advisor.
There are so many of them. He needed lots of advice.
There are. But yeah, I mean, I think because of Iraq, I think that may never happen. But you may
rule
not
it
be
out,
wrong.
is what I say.
No. Well, I've never ruled out that he will somehow return as some kind of president of the United Kingdom.
No, it's a terrible thought.
It's a bit worrying. And our friend in California may be playing into his hands. But anyway.
But only accidentally.
No, of course. Good to see you. Peter Hitchens, brilliant as ever. His column, of course, not only now every Sunday in the Mail on Sunday, but he also gives you a few bonuses during the week in the Daily Mail. So look out for those. We will be talking about Keir Starmer and his newly formed view of the NHS, which apparently means it should reform or die, according to him. This is talkTV.